You are not fighting a difficult personality, you are fighting a black hole. And the most dangerous thing you are doing right now is believing that if you just say the right words, they will finally understand how much they've hurt you. But here is the truth you aren't ready to hear. They don't want to understand. Once you realize they are incapable of empathy, you stop trying to fix them and start reclaiming your life. We have all been there. Spent hours crafting the perfect email or rehearsing the perfect speech, thinking, if I just explain it clearly, they'll see it. They won't. When you engage in that cycle, you are feeding the very dynamic that is breaking you down. Today, we're going to talk about how to stop the cycle of disrespect by fundamentally changing the only thing you can control, your own response. The primary reason you must stop explaining yourself to a narcissist is that you are attempting to use a tool designed for healthy relationships in an environment where it is functionally useless. In a secure, empathetic dynamic, an explanation serves as a bridge, helping the other person understand your boundaries, feelings, or needs so they can adjust their behavior to preserve the connection. However, when you offer an explanation to someone with narcissistic traits, you are not building a bridge. You are providing a blueprint of your own psyche. They do not interpret your words as a bid for closeness or mutual understanding. Instead, they scan your explanation for leverage, looking for inconsistencies, emotional triggers, or justifications they can flip back against you to portray themselves as the victim and you as the aggressor. By detailing your reasoning, you are essentially engaging in a negotiation where the other party has no intention of reaching a fair settlement. The more you say, the more ammunition you provide for gaslighting. They will dissect your sentences, twist your logic, and force you into a circular conversation where you find yourself defending your own reality rather than addressing the initial disrespectful behavior. This process is known as JADE, justifying, arguing, defending, and explaining, and it is a trap. The moment you start justifying your position, you have implicitly handed them the authority to judge whether your reasons are valid enough. You are granting them permission to sit in judgment of your lived experience. By ceasing all explanations, you effectively withdraw your consent to be interrogated. You stop treating their opinion of your life as a currency that holds value. When you provide a simple, firm boundary without a secondary clause or justification, you reclaim your autonomy, leaving them with no new material to exploit and forcing the interaction to conclude on your own terms. The gray rock method is your most potent tool for neutralizing the emotional volatility that a narcissist thrives upon. At its core, the technique requires you to become intentionally uninteresting, emotionally unresponsive, and utterly boring to someone who is constantly hunting for dramatic reactions. Narcissists operate on what we call narcissistic supply. This is the validation, anger, fear, or confusion they extract from you when they provoke a reaction. Every time you scream back, tearfully explain your pain, or attempt to defend your honor, you are essentially handing them a paycheck. By refusing to engage in that cycle, you starve them of the very thing they are trying to consume. To practice this, you must consciously strip your interactions of all emotional intensity. When they attempt to bait you with insults, accusations, or provocative lies, you respond with short, non-committal phrases like, I see, okay, or that is an interesting perspective. You are not agreeing with them, nor are you arguing. You are simply acknowledging their presence while refusing to grant them entry into your internal world. Your goal is to be as unremarkable as a gray rock sitting on the side of a path. This process requires a high degree of internal discipline because your natural human instinct is to defend your reality when it is under attack. However, you must prioritize the preservation of your own mental health over the desire to be understood. When you cease providing emotional fuel, the narcissist will inevitably become bored or frustrated. They may temporarily escalate their efforts to try and trigger a reaction out of you, but if you remain consistent and unmoved, the reinforcement schedule they rely on is broken. Once they realize that you are no longer a viable source of drama, they will typically turn their focus toward a target that is more willing to play the game, effectively creating the distance necessary for your own peace. Detaching from the outcome is the psychological pivot point where you shift from being a pawn in their game to an observer of their pathology. Many of us remain trapped in cycles of abuse because we are deeply tethered to the hope that if we simply articulate our pain with enough clarity or love, the person will finally have a light bulb moment, apologize, and change. This is the ultimate trap of the human heart. When you are dealing with a narcissist, you must come to terms with the reality that they are fundamentally unable to prioritize your needs or acknowledge the damage they cause. Attachment to a specific outcome, such as wanting them to understand you, respect you, or admit they are wrong, is essentially placing your emotional well-being in their hands, which is the most dangerous place it could possibly be. By detaching, you are not saying that their behavior is acceptable or that you do not care about the relationship. Rather, you are accepting that you cannot control their perception, their behavior, or their morality. You relinquish the role of the fixer, the translator, and the martyr. You stop waiting for them to provide the closure you need to move forward. This liberation comes when you realize that your peace is entirely independent of their validation. When you stop demanding that they be the person you want them to be, you stop feeling the crushing disappointment of their inevitable failures. You begin to observe their manipulations for what they are, reflexive, pathological behaviors, rather than personal slights aimed at your character. This shifts your internal state from one of reactive defense to one of quiet, grounded protection. You keep your dignity intact because you are no longer trying to change the unchangeable, allowing you to walk away with your integrity and your sanity fully preserved. Setting boundaries with a narcissist is not a negotiation, and it is not an invitation for a collaborative discussion. When you enter a conversation with a narcissist, the goal is often to reach a consensus, but because they prioritize dominance over resolution, they will interpret your request for a boundary as a declaration of war or an opening for debate. To break this, you must treat your boundaries as non-negotiable statements of reality rather than flexible suggestions. A boundary is not about telling the other person what they are allowed to do. It is a clear, definitive statement about what you will do in response to specific behaviors. It is the architectural limit of your own personal space and dignity, and it does not require their permission, their understanding, or their agreement to be valid. Because you are not negotiating, you must eliminate the please, the maybe, and the would you mind. Instead, use direct, declarative language that leaves no room for back and forth manipulation. If someone is shouting at you, you do not need to explain why shouting is hurtful or ask them to lower their voice. You state, "I am not going to continue this conversation while you are yelling," and then you exit the room. The boundary is your action, not their reaction. When you stop treating your needs as things that need to be vetted or approved by someone who lacks empathy, you stop giving them the power to overrule your autonomy. If they push against that limit, which they almost certainly will, you do not explain the boundary again. You simply enforce the consequence you previously stated. By refusing to enter the theater of negotiation, you remove their ability to wear you down through persistence, ensuring that your standards remain firm regardless of their attempts to undermine them. If you are tired of losing pieces of yourself to people who refuse to change, hit that subscribe button. We are building a community dedicated to radical self-preservation, and I want you to be a part of it. To stop jading, justifying, arguing, defending, and explaining is to dismantle the most effective weapon in a narcissist's arsenal. When you feel the urge to explain yourself, you are operating under the misguided assumption that if you provide enough data, logic, or emotional truth, the narcissist will eventually see your perspective and change their behavior. In reality, they are not listening to understand. They are listening to identify the fault lines in your argument. Every detail you provide becomes a point of contention, a fact they can distort, or a vulnerability they can exploit to keep you trapped in a cycle of defensive combat. When you justify, you are implicitly telling them that your choices, your feelings, and your boundaries are subject to their approval. You are granting them the authority to act as the judge of your reality, and as long as you are seeking that validation, you are handing them the power to gaslight you. Arguing and defending are equally counterproductive because they require you to play on their field, where the rules are rigged and the goalposts are constantly moving. They do not care about the truth. They care about winning the interaction and maintaining a position of superiority. By providing explanations, you are essentially trying to teach a lesson to someone who is actively sabotaging the classroom. Every minute spent defending your position is a minute spent feeding the dynamic you are trying to escape. True power lies in the refusal to participate in the performance of debate. When you stop jading, you strip them of their primary means of manipulation. You remain grounded in your own truth without the need for external confirmation. By withholding your explanations, you signal that your reality is not up for negotiation, leaving them with no ammunition to use against you and allowing you to remain centered in your own autonomy. Trusting your own reality is the single most critical act of rebellion against a gaslighting environment. Narcissists operate by systematically eroding your confidence in your own perceptions, memory, and judgment. They weave a web of contradictions, denials, and distortions, the classic "that never happened" or "you're too sensitive," designed to make you doubt the very foundation of your own experience. If you allow their version of events to replace your own, you become a hollow version of yourself, constantly looking to them to define what is real, what is true, and what is acceptable. This is why you must treat your own memory and intuition as non-negotiable truths. When you are in the presence of someone who consistently rewrites history, your internal compass is your only lifeline, and you must protect it with unrelenting vigilance. Maintaining this clarity often requires you to move your reality out of the void of memory and into the concrete world. This means keeping private journals, saving messages, or confiding in a trusted circle of people who are not under the narcissist's spell. These external anchors serve as a reality check when the narcissist tries to destabilize your sense of self. It is essential to recognize that their refusal to acknowledge your reality is not a failure of your memory, but a deliberate tactic of their pathology. You do not need them to admit to the truth for the truth to remain valid. When you stop looking to the person causing the confusion for the clarity you need, you stop the gaslighting in its tracks. By holding firmly to your own lived experience, you deny them the power to shape your identity, ensuring that you remain grounded in the facts of your life, even when they are frantically trying to pull the rug out from under you. Emotional distance is the ultimate protective barrier, acting as an internal vault where you keep your most authentic self tucked away from the reach of the narcissist. Many people believe that to detach, they must physically exit a home or end a relationship immediately, but that is not always possible or safe. True protection begins in the mind. It is a decision to stop seeking emotional intimacy, validation, or support from someone who has proven they are incapable of providing it. When you stop looking to the narcissist to mirror your feelings or soothe your worries, you effectively withdraw your investment in their potential to love you. You are essentially shifting your role from a participant in an emotionally volatile dynamic to a detached observer, which dramatically reduces the impact their erratic behavior has on your nervous system. This form of detachment is an act of radical self-preservation. It involves curating your emotional responses so that you no longer offer them the highs or lows they crave. You keep your dreams, your genuine joys, and your deepest vulnerabilities to yourself, or share them only with people who have demonstrated the capacity for healthy, reciprocal connection. By building this wall, you prevent the narcissist from accessing the parts of you they could weaponize or devalue. It is not about becoming cold or unfeeling. Rather, it is about being selective with where you place your emotional energy. By starving the relationship of your emotional investment, you create a buffer zone that shields your self-worth from their criticism. This mental withdrawal allows you to remain physically present when necessary without sacrificing your internal stability, ensuring that even if they are in the room, they no longer have the power to invade your inner peace. The phrase "no" is a complete sentence precisely because it requires nothing else to exist. In the context of a relationship with a narcissist, we often feel a phantom obligation to provide a lengthy, detailed, and polite justification for our boundaries, as if we are trying to convince them that our reasons are good enough to be respected. However, this is a fallacy that keeps you trapped. When you add a reason to your no, you are inadvertently handing them a tool to dismantle your refusal. They will take your explanation, tear it apart, offer a counter-argument, or attempt to find a loophole, essentially treating your boundary as a negotiable request rather than a definitive statement of your reality. By stripping your response down to its most basic form, you deny them the material they need to continue the debate. Using no without an explanation is an act of reclaiming your sovereignty. It signals that your decisions do not require their vetting, validation, or agreement. It is an uncomfortable transition for many because we are socialized to be people pleasers, but it is necessary for self-preservation. When you say no and then stop talking, you create a space of silence that forces the other person to sit with their own reaction. You are not responsible for how they feel about your boundary. You are only responsible for holding it. If they press for more, you simply repeat the word no or offer a neutral repetitive phrase like, "I've already made my decision." This repetition is not an invitation to argue, but a clear sign that the conversation has concluded. By refusing to elaborate, you reclaim your authority, ending the cycle of interrogation and reinforcing that your time, energy, and choices belong solely to you. The path to reclaiming your life from the influence of a narcissist is not found in changing them. It is found in the radical act of changing yourself. You have spent far too long pouring your energy into a void, hoping that the right words, the perfect explanation, or a display of ultimate patience would finally result in the respect you deserve. But the truth is, you cannot negotiate your worth with someone who is committed to misunderstanding you. By choosing to stop explaining, embracing the stillness of the gray rock, and holding your boundaries as non-negotiable pillars, you are doing more than just ending a disagreement. You are ending your participation in a system designed to diminish you. This is not a process that happens overnight, and it will undoubtedly trigger resistance from those who have grown accustomed to having access to your emotional supply. Expect that initial pushback, but do not mistake it for a sign that you are doing something wrong. It is simply the sound of a system trying to pull you back into a familiar, destructive loop. As you commit to these shifts, you will find that your internal world becomes quieter and more secure. You will stop waiting for an apology that will never come and stop seeking validation from a source that is incapable of providing it. Your peace is not a prize to be won through their approval. It is your birthright. When you finally release the need to control their behavior and focus entirely on protecting your own sovereignty, you move from a state of reactive survival into a life of authentic, grounded freedom. You are not losing a connection, you are gaining yourself, and that is the only victory that truly matters.